Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion on this Monday morning, and earnings continue to roll on. Last week's earnings, well, there was one name specifically that really did have a big influence because of what cascaded after they reported. That was Snap. But before we get into that, how about the fact that yesterday, on Friday, we actually had the Dow started off actually pretty decent. Highs of the day early on. Then just started to move to the downside. The next thing you know, as we got through the day, American Express was holding things up pretty nicely, actually, but we were down 300 points late in the session. We did recover off of that. We did finish down still 130 points. It was the NASDAQ, though. The NASDAQ really was the area that was getting hit the hardest. That was because of Snap and all of the rest that came along with it. But Snap was down. It closed as the NASDAQ closed down 225 points. I'll tell you what, Snap was getting absolutely just bludgeoned down 30+%. It was just an absolute hammering of Snap. And that meant Google, that meant Meta, that meant all of those various stocks just in sentiment moving to the downside. As a matter of fact, you take a look over at the NASDAQ, it was up over 12,000 early on. And now we're a pretty good distance from that level, especially because in today's market, we are seeing a little bit more of that selling in the NASDAQ. We'll see how things get shaped up in just a second. But oil, we talk about crude all the time. It got underneath 100 last week. It stayed right around those mid-90s, 95, 96. That's about where we closed. But I continue to hit this, and I will continue to hit this. Nobody's talking about nat gas. And nat gas just continues to make another move higher and higher and higher. It actually hit 830 on Friday. So that's something just to keep an eye on, because you know what? It's up again today. Just keep an eye on that thing as we talk about. Volatility index, yes, it's low. It's back down towards 23. The volatility index of the NASDAQ is down underneath that 30 level at 29. So we're seeing volatility coming out despite the fact that we are in the biggest week now of earnings season starting this week. So be interesting to see exactly what happens with that volatility index of the VX and the VIX. We'll see as we get deeper into the week, of course. 43 million contracts trading on Friday. Really nice day. I'll tell you what, I was getting concerned that we were losing it because of maybe summer and all the rest of it, but it just took earnings for us to see that volume really start to pump right back into the system once again. 43 million, that's a big number. That's actually above the year-to-date average. So pretty strong. We did have the 2s and 10s actually both close beneath 3. As I mentioned, Snap being the real catalyst on Friday of a lot of what was going on in the market because of the influence and because of the read-through and everybody going over to all these various names, whether that's Google or Meta or whatever, definitely getting pushed to the downside. So communications, that's that sector. It was down over 4% on Friday, getting absolutely hammered. Technology down about 1.5% on Friday. Energy was down nearly 1%. Financials were down a little more than 0.5%. You get the idea. And that accelerated throughout the day to actually close, not on the lows, but not too far from those lows. We had some healthcare. We talked about some of those hospitals. HCA, a great day, up 11%. We had DR Horton had another good day as well in the builders. We've had Lennar, we have DR, we've had a couple of those names of late actually having a little bit of a leadership role and a little bit of a push to the upside. I mentioned American Express, but I'm going to say it again. The record numbers that they put up, a lot of things that the read-through was certainly something very, very interesting. And I think a lot of us were taking a look at nice deep dive into that as well. XL Energy, Procter & Gamble, those were your strong points. But then you had Seagate, and that was a name that struggled, along with Western Digital, along with Marvell, along with NVIDIA. NVIDIA had that great run early in the week, and everybody joking about and whatever with Paul Pelosi and everything else. But regardless, we did see NVIDIA make that big, powerful move up towards 180, and then it did pull back fairly rapidly throughout the rest of the week. But Snap, Meta, Google, all getting hammered. Nucor. Now that when you look at materials, we've been having some pretty decent moves here and there, but Nucor was down almost 7% on Friday. So that's a big drop. We had Lucid, we had Datadog, we had Verizon, Nike, Boeing, all those names to the downside. You can understand why we had the negativity that we did have for the S&P and all the major indices themselves. So as we get into earnings season, this is the week that people have been waiting for. You've got Apple, you've got Microsoft, the list goes on and on, McDonald's and Coke and Boeing and everything. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I believe it's 170 of the S&P 500 report this week. Very, very big week. So how are we kicking it off? Well, the Dow started up about 120 points early on, not so bad. The NASDAQ was up about 20 points, a little bit of a recovery off those lows. The NASDAQ's just been struggling ever since. The first hour of trade, it's been bouncing around a little bit, but primarily to the downside. As a matter of fact, last I looked before coming on, down about 70 points. I looked over at the Dow. The Dow was actually hanging in there pretty decent. It's been bouncing around as well, a little bit of a bumpy ride. Nothing too chaotic in terms of the moves, but did give up that 100-plus move. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, we were up 100. And then the next thing you know, we're up about 75. I think right before coming on here, we were starting to get pushed down towards that flat area, maybe even negative territory as I was coming on. We also have crude hanging around 95, 96, just as we talked about. That seems to be the area, at least for this very, very short term, seems to be where it finds itself. Meanwhile, nat gas, now it's 8:30 on Friday, 8:50 is what it's approaching today. Continues that move to the upside. We had wheat up nearly 3% early on. Corn was up 2.5% early on. Yes, I know we focus a lot of the time specifically on crude, maybe a little bit on natural gas, but commodities themselves, we are seeing some areas that are starting to get a little bit of a lift once again. We'll see if that continues. We did get the 2-year back over 3, but the 10-year just below 3, so we've got that still in play. People have been talking about that. You had the volatility index right around 24, just a little bit of a lift from where it was. Bitcoin holding close to 22,000. Last I looked, it was just beneath that level of 22,000. Did hit 24,000 last week. Not too terribly far away from that, but we're seeing a little bit of a pullback now. Technology, it was down early, down about 0.5%. It continued to pull a little bit further, down about 1%. I look over at the industrials. They were down close to 0.5%. They actually jumped up to be almost 0.5% to the positive side of things. Energy continues to have a nice little bit of a push to the upside. Started off a little bit, up about 0.5%. It was up nearly 2%. Then it was starting to pull back a little bit as well. And financials that hadn't done a whole lot early on, that was down a little over, or up a little over 0.5% just moments ago when I last looked. So it's names like McKesson. That's one of the names on the positive side of things. We've got Valero. We've got Intuitive Surgical. That's always an interesting one for me because that says a lot about the economy. Are people willing to, and hospitals able to, pay for what those machines cost? Very expensive. That gives you a little bit of an insight on the economy itself. United Health having a pretty good day today. Also look over at CF and Mosaic. I talked about wheat and corn. Well, kind of in that category as well. We also have Freeport Mac having a pretty good start to the day. Where we have a little bit of pressure, names like Newmont, we've got all of those cruise ships once again pulling back. Carnival and Royal and Norwegian all in negative territory. Boeing, Salesforce getting a little bit of a hit to the downside. NVIDIA, I just talked about, had that big pop up. It's now been pulling down. And matter of fact, last I looked, it was underneath 170. Last week, it was pushing 180. We also have DocuSign and Datadog. Those names all pulling the markets a little bit lower, along with Moderna, Lucid. You kind of get the idea from that. I got two unusuals, and then we're out of here, and I hope you have a great day. By the way, look for Rebels Edge at noon today. John and I will be there. We'll have some unusual there as well. We're going to be talking about breaking down some of the biggest news stories of the day so far, as well as a little bit of unusual option activity. On top of that, we're going to go into the sports world because both of us at one time did play a lot of different sports, from track and field to basketball to football, and you name it. And John at one time in his life was with the Chicago Bears, and I bounced around as well. So be talking about some of the sports. We got the NFL. You know what? Those seasonal camps are popping in there, and it's pretty exciting. Number one, Skechers. This one, it hits every once in a while, here and there we start to see it. Well, we've got earnings tomorrow at Skechers. They're buying 2,000 of this week, so they're playing the earnings. This week's expiring 39 calls. Stock was trading right around 37.5. Looking for a little bit of a push to the upside. Those were going for about $1.25. Next, I've got PBR. This one's really interesting. No, that's not Pabst Blue Ribbon, by the way. PBR is Petrobras. We're back into energy, baby. So this name has had some struggles, some of it maybe having to do with the dollar, everything else. But Friday, we had a buyer of November 14 calls. They bought nearly 60,000 of those calls on Friday. Unbelievable. They were hedged off, selling the upside against it. Today, we've got 40,000 of the January 14 calls being bought. 40,000, pretty good sized number. 50 cents. They're selling an upside call against that, but we're just focusing right now on what are they doing? They're looking for a bullish move out of Petrobras. We'll see if they can get that, but certainly 2 days in a row, two extremely large trades in terms of the volume of the trade. The cost a lot less, certainly 50 cents out to January, not terrible, but we are still looking at 40,000 options today that are trading there for about 50 cents. Folks, have a great day of trading. It's going to be a wild ride, but look for us today. Rebels Edge. You can go to Market Rebellion YouTube. You can do all those kinds of things and go to Rebels Edge. We will be there, John and myself, noon today. Have a great day of trading.